Hi there, it's Tracy Kiernan, and this acrylic painting tutorial is going to show you how to paint Cozy Fall Raccoon with acrylics on an 11 by 14 inch canvas. Let's go over brushes and colors. There are only two brushes for this and six colors in this tutorial, so a 3/4 flat wash and a number 4 round from the Princeton Velvet Touch line of brushes. And then I use paper plates for palettes, glass mason jar for water. I'm using Liquitex Basics paints, so Unbleached Titanium, Burnt Sienna, Light Blue Permanent. If you want to change the color of the scarf or make it more of a winter theme, you can substitute that orange out, so Cad Orange Hue, and then Mars Black, and Titanium White. There is an optional traceable template for this. If you are drawing this with me, you'll need a pencil, and if you're tracing it, you'll need graphite paper and a pencil. And let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to start with a blank white canvas, and I'm actually going to be drawing the raccoon on the blank white canvas first. So I have a pencil, and I'm going to break this down shape by shape. It is a stylized cartoon style raccoon, so it's not realistic, which is helpful. And I'm going to start by drawing kind of in the center, but a little bit higher than center. My canvas is vertical. I'm going to draw a big sort of eye shape, or like an almond shape. So big kind of curve that goes up, and then on the left and the right we go to a point. So this part goes down, it curves, but it's not as high of an arc as the top. So that part is going to be the bottom of his mouth area. So this whole shape is going to be his head. Next, I'm going to sketch out the ears, and by sketch, I mean I'm drawing this very lightly. I'm not pressing hard with a pencil, and I'm doing very loose sketch-like lines that are easy to erase. So my ears are two kind of curved lines that gather together at a point, kind of at the top of his head. There's quite a bit of spacing between the ears, and then the interior of the ears, going to just kind of duplicate that kind of curved triangular shape. So this is going to look like a cat for a little bit. And the nose, we're going to bring the nose down towards the bottom. The nose is not in the middle. It needs to be way down at the bottom. I have an oval shape for the nose. And then I did two little curved lines for the mouth. Looks like a cat. And then I'm going to do the bridge of the nose. These lines are going to kind of divide the coloration of our raccoon. So two vertical lines that go up from that oval nose and kind of stop towards the top of the head. Then I'm going to extend this line, so we're at that kind of nose bridge. We're going to create the first sort of division in color up here. This needs to be, goes up, and then it goes to the point over here on the right and the left. Make sure you have enough space below that, because we're going to do the eyes and another kind of division area. So I'm going back over ear, and I'm going to erase some of these lines up here by the ears. So this middle line and then these lines. So now this becomes part of the shape. And then this bottom part, I'm going to turn into a different, like a curved line that's curving downwards. I'm going to do two circles for the eyes. And then I'm going to create this kind of curved line that goes around the eyes. So this is going to be dark area on the raccoon's face, and this is going to go around the eyes, curves and connects down. So you should have space around that curve. And next we're going to do his scarf. So I'm going to take this down. It doesn't go the full width of the head, and it goes inwards, kind of starts just under the eye area. This one actually goes out a little bit further because that's the part of the scarf that's kind of hanging down. So that's this. This is the actual scarf part that's going around his neck. So we have the bottom of the head is going to be overlapping that scarf, and that scarf is going to be tucked under his bottom of the head. And then we can start drawing his body. So I found it easier to draw this coffee mug first so that I can get the placement of that, and then I can kind of draw where his hands are going to be. So I'm going to do the top sort of ellipse shape that goes to a point. So it's an oval that goes to a point on both sides. And then the little kind of curved line for the interior of the mug. And then we can sketch this down. You're welcome to change the style of this. You can make it like a Starbucks style coffee cup. I'm going to make this go almost all the way down to the bottom edge of the canvas and curve it down here. I am going to draw the handle of this. However, this is going to end up being erased anyway. It got a little complex, making it look like his hand is holding on to that handle. If you like the look of the handle, you can keep it. Maybe have his hand kind of going behind it. But I will end up erasing that. So that would be kind of your choice. Little kind of C line, two C lines that kind of connect to create the handle. And then we can start sketching where his arms are going to be. So we have the outward part of his arm over here, this part right here. So you have these kind of two curved lines for the inner arm, outer arm, and it kind of bends down. And the nice thing about this is it's a cartoon stylized drawing, so we don't have to make it look proportional or realistic. Little hands. And then you can do the little claws. So over here on the right, again, it's a little complex trying to get his arm to hold on to that. So we can either make his hand kind of going behind that, which would be helpful. You don't have to paint that hand. Or I'm going to just erase this and just go ahead and maybe the handle of the coffee mug is kind of to the side and we don't really see it, or there is no handle. So I do like a little hand, little claws. And then the nice thing about this is that we don't see the bottom half of his body, so we don't have to draw his legs or feet. We just can do a curved line that kind of goes down and off the edge of the canvas. I did that on this side as well. The tail is so fun. Definitely wanted to include a tail in a raccoon painting. And kind of adjusting the width right here. And this one, I'm going to make it go out a little bit wider as well. So this one kind of goes out more that way. And then little loose pieces for the scarf. Maybe there's another piece of scarf. This part kind of overlaps, and there's another part that kind of hangs out. And now for the tail. So we have some room over here on the left. I'm just drawing the edging of the tail, and it's kind of curving and going all the way up, towards the head area to create the basic shape for the tail. So that is it for the drawing portion. We are going to go ahead and start painting the raccoon in. And I'm going to load my paint palette with light blue permanent and titanium white. We are going to be painting the background first. I will also be using a 3/4 inch flat wash brush. So I'm going to load that into white and blue, mix about equal parts together. And so the background is very simple. We just want to paint the negative space around the raccoon. So I'm going to use my brush to kind of cut in around the ears, around the head, around the shape. And then the rest of the sky is big angled paint strokes going in different directions. I'm allowing the blue and the white to blend together, but not all the way, to create some pretty color variation in the sky. So you're just using the full width of the brush in kind of these bigger areas, angling it outwards around the raccoon. And then when you get close to the shape, use the tip of the brush to really kind of cut in on the edging. So you want pretty much all of your drawing to not have any of that background color on it. So right here, because the scarf has those like lines hanging down from the edging, I'm just going to cover that part up, knowing that I can repaint that area. We can always paint more sky at the end of the painting after we paint the raccoon. If there's any blank spots left over, that is okay. So same thing with the tail. Because of the textured edging, we can just kind of go over the shape and just kind of leave the middle part of that showing, and we can always paint over the sky. I did go over the lines of my drawing a little bit over here on the sides of the raccoon, just because there's going to be some fur texture in that area that might overlap part of the sky. And when this is done, you don't need to let it dry. You can go on to this next step. So we are going to start painting the raccoon in. And I'm going to start by mixing a gray on my palette. So we'll need Mars Black and Titanium White. And we'll need a nice clean number 4 round brush. I'm going to take my white and black, about equal parts black and white. I'm going to add burnt sienna to my palette too. So this is going to give me more of like a brownish gray color. So I'm going to take a little bit of burnt sienna and kind of mix that in there. And it's going to make this kind of warm brownish gray color. And I'm going to start at the top for the ears. And I'm basically going to paint the shape that I had drawn in. So little paint strokes at a time to kind of get that shape. Goes all the way to the background. And if you need to paint over part of the background, you can. There just shouldn't be any white canvas still showing through. So as I'm painting this part in, so this part of the raccoon, this top part is that dark gray color. I am going to kind of vary my color a bit. So I can grab a little bit of white and let that blend in on the canvas with the gray. And as I reload, I'm grabbing different amounts of that brown gray color we made and white. And it's going to create some pretty color variation. So it's not just all solid the same color, and it blends on the canvas. When I get to this kind of side part of the head, I'm going to take my paint strokes and kind of drag them outwards like this and sort of release the pressure so that the paint stroke kind of goes thick to thin. That is going to create some texture that's going to overlap parts of that sky background. And I'm going to fill in this whole top forehead area, the raccoon. I'm going to do the same thing over here, dragging that paint outwards to create that fur texture, reloading my paintbrush in different amounts of that brown gray color. And as you fill this part in, we're going to do kind of, so you can do this two ways. If you want to just kind of do smooth paint strokes, just filling in the shape, you can. If you want to give it more texture, like a fur texture, you're doing kind of shorter feathery paint strokes. So these are kind of going up and outwards. These are going up and outwards this way. But I'm doing kind of textured paint strokes. We can also go back over this and add fur texture later after this dries. Going back over on that side, adding more fur texture on the edges. And we can add some fur texture over the top or on top of his head. So up here, we have little pieces kind of sticking up. These are going this way, and then they kind of go up in the middle and then go back the other directions, little tiny marks. And then we can do this to the ears too. So these are little tiny marks that curve outwards and kind of go in the direction of the ear. If you are simplifying this painting, you don't have to add those little fur texture marks. Next, without rinsing the brush, grab a little bit of black and paint the interior of the ears. So I'm just going to paint these little triangles. Remember, the bottom part goes like a curve, and then that gets all painted in solid black. And if you have that gray color mixing in with it where it's not a super dark color, that's okay. It just needs to be darker than the outer part, the fur part of the ear. And since I have this black already on my brush, I'm going to go ahead and paint the nose. I ended up making my nose a little bit larger than what was drawn, so I just painted that oval in and made it bigger. And then the eyes ended up staying same shape. If you're painting this in and your circle is like wobbly, you can always adjust this later when we paint the other darker gray color around the eyes. And we're not going to do detail on the eyes right now, it's just solid black. So next I'm going to paint the lighter color that's going to be under the dark gray color on his head. So I'm going to rinse my brush off completely, and this is an almost a white color, although I want it to be more of a very, very light gray off-white color. So I'm going to take titanium white and I'm going to add just a very, very small dot of black into it. That's going to make this into a very light gray color. It should be much lighter than this color above it. So once I test that out and I'm okay with that color, I'm just going to paint this in again. So these little paint strokes can go outside the line to create some of that texture. And I'm just going to go in that direction, short paint strokes. I can change my color a little bit. I can even make these ones kind of go outside the line. That creates a little bit more feather texture. And you're just going to paint this whole area, this bottom part of his mouth, part around, above the eye. You do your little paint strokes that are going over that gray. So that gray actually isn't dry all the way, and it is blending a little bit, and that's actually okay. I'm going to paint over the mouth, so the part where we drew this area right here, I'm going to paint over that. Your drawing may or may not show through that layer of paint, but we can always go back and redo that mouth. And this part is optional. I'm actually going to kind of mix, it's almost the same shade of gray as the dark gray that we did earlier by the ears. But I'm just going to take this kind of darker gray and kind of just go in there and add a few little kind of fur strokes over the dark area. These are just thin paint strokes that kind of curve and go around the eyes. And then a few kind of darker fur strokes kind of on the edges of his head. So next we're going to do the area around the eyes. So this one needs to be pretty much the same shade of gray that we used for the ears and kind of the upper part of the head. And so we're going to use our gray and add a little brown into it to kind of make that brownish gray. And if you need to add just a little bit of water in there, and that really helps to kind of loosen that paint up and helps you get into these kind of smaller areas. You just don't want to add too much water in there because it'll be drippy. So we're going to go around the eyes, and this gray shouldn't be as dark as that black. So if you notice, ooh, it's too dark, add a little bit more white in there just so those eyes will show up. So I go around the eye and then fill in that shape in. And then the edging, you can just kind of drag that paint outwards to create that fur texture on the bottom edge. And you just want to repeat what you just did on the left side of the raccoon. So go around the eyes, add a little bit more white in there if the black is, if it's not enough contrast. Do the little fur texture on the edging. And this is optional, but if you want, you can grab a little bit of white on your brush and go in there and add some light colored paint strokes. You just don't want this area to end up being too light. It should still be a darker part, but just going in there. Again, optional, but gives it a little bit of texture. And then on this area as well, just a few, so you don't want to go too light with this, and also this darker gray brown has dried by now, so just maybe kind of dry brush lighter fur strokes up in that area. Next, we are going to paint the body area of the raccoon. So this is going to be a dark gray, and we're just going to paint all around that mug. So I'm going to use this base gray that we used earlier, add some more brown to it. If needed, add more black and white to it. And I'm going to just do solid color right now. So I'm going to go under the scarf and just fill this area in. It's kind of a dark and shadowy area. Go around the mug the best you can, and I'm not doing the arms quite yet. I'm just doing this part. So I don't want to lose the shape of his arm. I'm just filling this shadowy dark area in. And then we can go under the mug area. So down here, just outline kind of the negative space around that mug. Same color, same just solid color, not adding any texture in that or different colors in that. Just getting this filled in with color. When I have to remake a color, I'm not super concerned about making it the same color. Like this one might be slightly darker, and that's okay, especially since I could blend it in with that color that's already there. So if you have to remix certain colors on your palette, I think that's okay as well if you don't get it the exact same shade that it was before. And get this filled in, some outlining the shape, the sides of the bottom part of his body, and then all this is just going to get filled in solid with that dark brown gray color. So now that we have this base shadowy kind of color in, we can go in and add some texture to this. So I'm going to take my titanium white and we're going to do this before this dries so that this can show up and kind of blend with that dark color. So I don't want this to be too light. Again, this is a darker area of our raccoon, so adding too much white in here will lighten it up too much. My intent is just to add some texture. So I'm taking this white and just kind of doing downward curved strokes on both sides of this part, the lower part of his body, kind of like where his legs would be. And then his front kind of chest area, we can just kind of do maybe these white paint strokes in there, texture. This is also optional. If you want to just leave it that dark gray solid color, you can do that instead. If that texture kind of intimidates you, that's okay. Just leave it solid. I'm going to start painting the arms in, and for now let's start with a lighter color just so we don't lose the shape of this arm. So I am just kind of using maybe a medium gray color. There's still that kind of darker gray, but I'm using the white to make this lighter at first and just kind of outline the shape. Fill it in solid. Make sure that this is curving right here. So the arm is going at a curve. I am going to paint the hand for now, knowing that when I paint the mug, I'm going to have to paint over this anyway, but I'll just paint that in for now. So very simple, just adding the color. We can always add more detail later. It might look messy right now. That's okay. That's part of the process. I'm going to take this darker gray and kind of go in there and make that dark. I was kind of smoothing out that fur texture right there on his chest. So same thing over here. I'm using that lighter gray just because I want this arm. I don't want to lose the shape of the arm. So I'm going to take this. It's going to go around, doing curved kind of textured paint strokes to fill this in. Curves. And then we can paint the hand, even though that's going to be painted over later when we do the mug. I'm going to take that darker gray, get in there, and do the little hand shape. The hand shape's very abstract right now because I'm going to paint over that later. And a few darker kind of textured strokes. So the direction of the paint strokes kind of defined that arm. And it's going in. I need just some of that texture down there, the bottom part of his body. I'm going to make the area under his scarf a little bit more shadowy just because there's going to be the scarf there and it would be kind of casting darker colors. So I'm going to make that gray, but just add a teeny bit more black into that. So it's just a tad bit darker and just kind of go over this area kind of solid. I'm going to start painting his tail in, and so he's going to have black and white stripes on his tail, but for now let's just do kind of a medium gray to light gray color. So almost the same color as that light gray part of his face, maybe just a little bit darker than that. So I'm just going to take this, and we could do this like texture thing. So as I'm filling this tail out, I'm doing kind of these big rounded sort of pointed edged paint strokes to get his tail to have texture. However, it's also, you could also just paint it the shape kind of like a solid shape instead of having the texture on the edges. So you can just take this and just kind of outline the basic shape of his tail and then fill it in. And then when we go back and do the coloring, like the black and white stripes, we can add that texture in there later. I want to make sure the tail is in the back. So I'm just going to go back over here with that darker gray color and just kind of go and kind of redefine the side of the bottom part of his body. And then I want to take this darker color and I'm just adding more of this sort of shadow color. So you remember like what we did under the scarf? I'm going to do this under the arms and under the mug. So that's going to give it a little bit more shadow on the bottom. I'm also going to add that dark color on his arm. So you're essentially outlining that inner part of the arm. So that part and this part are dark, and that really helps those arms to stand out. So if you need to, you can even use just pure black to outline that. I didn't outline the hands because I'm going to paint that mug, so we'll deal with that later. The next step we're going to do is paint the scarf. And I chose orange because it's a fall themed painting. However, you can do whatever color scarf you want. So this is Cad Orange Hue. And I'm just going to have fun with this orange and kind of change it a little bit. So I'm going to do a little bit of titanium white into the orange, and you can even do a little bit of burnt sienna into it to make it kind of more of a like a brownish orange color. And just paint this in. Our paint strokes are going horizontally, these on the side going curved. So just outline the shape and then fill it in solid. We can do some color variation by maybe adding little bits of brown in there. So right here, I'm going to make this go a little bit darker by just adding a little bit more brown to the brush with the orange so that it's a little bit more shadowy. And also it just kind of stands out from the rest of the scarf when you do that. And then we can just use the orange to kind of fill that in and blend that with that darker color. And we have the other little scarf piece that's hanging down right here. I just used the orange with that. If you want, you can make that one shadowy as well. Next, I'm going to utilize the black. So add black to the brush without rinsing. Just a little bit of black right there is all you need. And I'm just going to kind of take that and add some shading to the bottom part of that scarf. And then this bottom edge over here on the right gives it a little bit of shadow. And then over here on the left towards the top. So you don't want to add too much black in here, but I'm just doing a little bit and kind of blending it with that orange. It's still wet. So this is a little bit shadowy right under his head. I'm going to rinse the brush and do a little bit of highlighting on the scarf. So I'm going to take my orange, actually go back over here and kind of use this orange to blend that darker part in a little bit more, since that black is still wet, so wet on wet blending to get that shadow to blend in a little bit. And then without rinsing the brush, grabbing some white over here on the left, just a little bit of white on the far left part of the scarf. We can do a little bit over here on these pieces and just kind of blend that in. When this dries, we'll add that plaid design or whatever design you want to add to his scarf later. So if you don't like the highlight and shadowing part of this, you don't have to do it. You can just paint the scarf the same color throughout and maybe just only do a little bit of highlighting or shadowing with it. I'm going to rinse my brush off and load it in just the black and do the mouth next. You can also draw his mouth in with a paint pen if you want better control of the brush. But when I'm going to do fine lines, I like to pinch the bristles first and load just the end of the paintbrush in that color. And that helps me get those really thin lines in, and I can do his mouth. I'm also going to take the black that's still on my brush and use that to just add a little bit more texture in the dark areas of the raccoon around the eyes. You don't have to do this. This is optional. This just adds a little bit more fur texture. And then I'm adding a little bit more fur texture on the top part of his head, kind of around the ears, and then this middle top part as well. These are the pieces that are hanging off over the edge and overlapping our blue sky area. And then I'm going to take the lighter gray color and I'm going to go in here and add little pieces of fur that are overlapping the inner part of his ear. So right here and right here, little tiny, very, very light paint strokes, adding a little bit more fur texture on the top of his ears. And next I am going to paint the mug. And so this is Unbleached Titanium. This is going to be the base color for the mug. If you want to, you can change the color to a different color. I just chose this light sort of beige color. And using the 4-round brush all cleaned off and rinsed, we're just going to paint this in. So I did say earlier, we are going to paint over the hands. It just makes things easier, I think. If you like the way your hands, the raccoon's hands turned out, you can paint around it if that's easier for you. I'm just going to outline the shape, and then the shape right here. I don't want to lose the opening of the mug, so I'm going to leave that white for now. And then after outlining the shape, just fill it in. You want your paint strokes to go in this curved direction. That's going to give the mug more of a 3-dimensional look when you make your paint strokes go in that direction. And we're not altering the color at all. This is all just pure beige right now. Next, without rinsing, I'm going to grab this burnt sienna. So if your burnt sienna dried up, just load a little bit more on your paint palette. But I'm going to use the burnt sienna for my shadowing part of the mug. So I'm going to go down here on the bottom and just kind of lightly blend this brown in at the bottom. And then on the interior of the cup, like right here, this isn't the coffee yet. This is just the interior of the actual mug. Do a little bit and we still see part of the opening. It's still white, and I'm just going to blend a little bit more on the bottom. So the bottom right part of the mug is a little bit more shadowy, and we're going to make the left part of the mug lighter in color. So I rinsed my 4-round, and now I'm making a really dark brown color. I'm taking the burnt sienna, mixing just a little bit of black into it, so it's a nice dark brown color, and that's going to be painted right here. This is that coffee color inside the mug. So it's the opening that's left over, and we still see part of the mug behind it, that darker part of the mug. And all of this is like an ellipse shape that's pointed on both sides, and it's just solid brown. So later on we can add some fun swirls in there for coffee, and then we can paint swirly steam lines, but for now we have to let that dry. I'm going to take that brown and just kind of loosely add a little bit more of that dark just on the bottom and the right part of the mug. I'm going to load some fresh titanium white onto my palette and do some highlighting for the mug. Rinse that brush off completely, dry, grab the white, and then so up here in this very top part of the rim, top edge, I'm doing that white. And then this part right here, outlining that white. The white is blending with that beige right now for me, so that's why it's not showing up super bright, but that's okay. We don't need it to be pure bright white. And then over here on the left, a little bit of highlighting, just kind of curving these paint strokes and kind of blending that with the beige, kind of holding my brush, using the full bristles to kind of drag that in. Next, we're going to use titanium white and still the same brush to do detail work on the nose and the eyes. So I'm going to start out by just doing a very simple highlight on the nose. So you can do it on the upper left or upper right. I'm putting mine on the left. So just a little curved line, and then these eyes. You need a really steady hand for this, and you want to just use just the tip of that brush to make a very thin line. So we're just doing an inner outline just on the bottom half of the eye. So bottom half of the right eye just gets a little white outline, and then the left eye, same thing. If you have a white paint pen, that can give you better control during this step. So I am slowing this video down for you so you can see how to do that. Just a white outline on the bottom parts of both of those eyes. And then this part's easy. We're just going to do a single white dot for a highlight. And that's going to go upper right, little dot, and on the other eye as well. And then I'm going to rinse and take my black, and I'm going to do a little simple eyelash or eyebrow. So I'm going to take the black and I'm going to outline the outer part of that circle, and then when I get to that far right end, it's just going to kind of curve out and upwards a little bit. Do that to both sides. We are going to do the texture on the tail next, specifically the stripes. So I'm going to take my round brush and the Mars Black, and I'm going to start right here at the top. And for each stripe, I'm doing this kind of texture, rounded strokes, fur texture. So they're kind of going one way and kind of go vertical in the middle, and then they kind of switch and go the other way. And so we're going to do multiple black stripes, and we will do this for the white as well. We'll add more fur texture for that. So I'm going to rinse, and I'm going to do the same thing that I just did, but with the white. So I'm going to start up here and do a white kind of striped area. So the finished version actually has black on the tip of the tail. I didn't add that just yet, so I will go in and add a black tip later. So this right here, white. Your white pieces right here can overlap parts of the black. And then a little white texture down here. I'm actually going to lighten up these stripes just a little bit by adding kind of a medium gray over the black. And then I'm going to go and add this black fur to the tip of his tail. So kind of the same concept with the fur texture, only I'm letting it kind of go to more of a point right in the center. And there's one more dark stripe down here. The next thing I'm going to do is add the plaid sort of design on the scarf, and this scarf can be customized. You can also just leave it a solid color. So I'm going to take my brown and make some orange into it. So it's still more of a brown color, but it's got a brownish orange color to it. It just needs to be darker than the scarf so that these lines show up. I'm going to do a very basic sort of plaid design. And so these lines are going to go vertically, but still kind of curved because of the scarf. It's kind of curved and different. So this one's going the opposite way over here. They're relatively evenly spaced apart. Actually, they're not evenly spaced apart. They're kind of randomly spaced apart. And those lines ended up going diagonal. These ones are going the opposite way. And so I'm not altering this color. It's just the same color throughout. This line is also going kind of curved, and those two lines ended up being close together, and then a further apart line here, but curved because the scarf is going in a curved direction. Add a few lines to this piece, but again, keeping it very simple. And I'm going to do the little pieces kind of hanging out of the scarf. I'm using orange for that and just kind of dragging my little paint strokes down very lightly. We can do brown or darker color in there. You can even go back and add some white in there for some color variation. I'm going to paint his little hands next, and that we could rinse the brush, or we don't have to rinse the brush, but we need black. So I'm just going to do basic, like a little hand with little bumps, and that's overlapping the mug. And then same thing for this one. Little bump lines, 3 or 4, and then you want to just fill it in black. And right here I'm grabbing a little bit of the gray or white and just kind of dragging that and blending that into the rest of the arm. I'm going to do the little claws. So I loosened that black paint and twisted my bristles just so I can get the very, very fine detail work. And I did 3 little claws on each side. Next, I'm going to rinse the brush and do the little pumpkin that's on the mug. You can change the symbol on this to something else. You can do a little snowflake if you're doing a winter theme. And I'm just going to do a basic pumpkin, so oval in the center, and then like curved lines on each side of that oval. And we can kind of change the orange. We can add white to it to kind of lighten it, or if we need to darken it, we can add either the brown or black to it. But I just did, these are pretty much the same color, so orange oval in the center, then 2 more sort of bump lines on each side of the pumpkin. And then I'm going to add some dark brown lines on the pumpkins. I'm going to rinse the brush and get brown and black. So this is burnt sienna and Mars black. And I'm just going to go in there and outline that middle oval piece and then the outer two pieces. And then we can do a little stem on top of that. I'm going to also paint little orange leaves on the cup. So using that Cad Orange Hue and the number 4 round, and I'm going to do little tiny pointed leaves, one on the upper left and one on the lower right. And then a dark brown color for the stems. I'm going to rinse the brush and then I'm going to use the white to paint a swirl kind of design inside the coffee. So maybe a little bit of brown so it's not pure white. So just kind of like a spiral right inside of the cup. And then I'm going to take my black and outline this. And if it needs some outlining on the outer part of the cup, if you feel like that might help things to kind of stand out better, you can. You can use black and just kind of loosely outline pretty much anything in this painting that you feel like maybe it needs a little bit of contrast or outlining. So I'm doing a little bit down here, make that a little bit more shadowy as well. For the spiral little steam, we can get some fresh white and use the number 4 round brush. And we can take a twist because these are going to be thin lines. I'm going to take these lines and curl them up. I'm going to do 3 little spiral lines. So I didn't want these to go too high. I didn't want to overlap the raccoon's face or anything, but I suppose you can make the steam go higher or in a different direction. I'm just going to go in there and maybe dry brush some of the edging of the steam, so it's not just like a single line. It's a line and then it's got a few, or like one line next to it that's kind of more translucent. It's a few more light colored fur texture pieces. The next thing I'm going to do is paint the leaves. So I'm going to do 5 leaves. They're just kind of flying. So I'm painting all of these white first so that the orange of the leaves will show up nice and bright. I'm going to do just basic leaf shapes that are kind of rounded and go to a point, and then we can also do the stem white as well. So getting all the shapes painted in first, and then when this white dries, we can go back and paint them orange. And I'm going to have them kind of go different directions. This one is going to be a random oak style leaf. So instead of smooth rounded edges, I'm going to do like little notches that are rounded. So I did 5 leaves, and we can start painting these in. We could just do solid orange for all of the leaves. However, I like to play around with colors. So I'm going to do orange with bits of brown blended into it. We can use that unbleached titanium, that beige color, and just kind of blend those colors in together. As you're painting your leaf in, you can use the white as well. There's no yellow in this palette, but if you want to add yellow, you can. You can even add bits of green into it. And then, so each leaf kind of has the same technique of different combinations of those colors that are on my paint palette. I'm going to do the stems next. So stems, you can mix black and brown together to get a really, really dark brown, or you can just do black. And I'm just going to extend. So I painted the stems already with the white, so I'm just going to go back over that. And then on the end of each stem, I'm doing like a little kind of sort of notch at the bottom. So I'll show you what I mean. So I did the stems, and then like a little kind of dot on the end of the stem. And if you want to, you can do the veins. I'm just gonna do the line down the middle. So that line extends from that stem. So where that stem is, you're just gonna extend it. But because that color isn't dry all the way, it's kind of just pushing the paint. That one showed up. This one also showed up. But the line doesn't go all the way to the end. And then when the leaves do dry, you can do the little veins on the leaves, or you can leave it without the little vein details. So I'm just extending little tiny kind of curved lines that are going outwards from that center line, using just the end point of the bristles to create those small paint strokes. The last final detail we're going to do to the raccoon is add the whiskers, and I'm going to do black whiskers first and then add some white to it. So I am really prepping my brush to create these thin lines. What I'm doing here is I'm twisting the bristles, making sure the paint is right there on the end. You can also add just a teeny bit of water to that black. It helps to kind of loosen it and get it more of an ink consistency. And that way, with a very light hand, we can paint these whiskers. So just kind of dragging that very thin line outwards. They do show up over the light color, however, not as much over the darker color. So what we can do is we can go back and add white to some of the whiskers so that it does show up against the darker parts. So I'm going to grab my white, same thing, and then instead of starting at the bottom, I'm just going to go back over the darker parts that are right here that overlap the dark part of his head. And creates, didn't necessarily paint over the black, just kind of next to it where he has like black and white whiskers. But that is it. This is the conclusion of how to paint a cozy fall raccoon. Hope you enjoyed this one. Thanks for watching and thanks for painting with me.